My good friend Ian, who many of you have met now multiple times, we have a code word that we say to one another when we are talking on the phone, and that code word is, "I'm in the house." And that is our code word to basically say, whatever gossip we're trying to talk about, we can't talk about it right now, you're going to have to give me a second, so that I can, scurry outside or something so that no one can overhear our conversation. That phrase came about mainly because of him, because, of course, he lives in what you all might consider like a monastery sort of situation. And so, there's a lot of people around all the time. And so whenever he and I wanted to talk about something, and he didn't want us to be overheard, he would say, "Hold on, I'm in the house." So meaning, I gotta wait. And then once he would go outside or go on a walk, then it would be fine. Because there's people, the walls are thin, and then also having lived with Franciscan friars for a while, I also knew for a fact that Franciscan friars were the worst gossips. In fact, there is even a phrase that I was taught very early on when I joined the Franciscans, and that is, telephone, telefax, telefriar. So, meaning, if you wanted a secret to go widely, you would tell a friar first, and then within the next day, everyone would know. And never really get the facts straight either, but that's another story for another day. So, Ian and I have this phrase that we say to each other, "I'm in the house." So, meaning, hold on, wait a second. And I think about that phrase because the disciples and Jesus sort of have the opposite situation. They are outside all day, constantly being surrounded by crowds of people. These disciples, this inner circle of Jesus, they're constantly walking through city streets and being followed, and people, it even says in some gospel stories, are pressing in on the disciples and Jesus. They are wanting to get so close. There's thousands of people that are waiting to hear Jesus' teaching on the hillside or on the lakeshore. And so it isn't until it says that the disciples go into the house, wherever house they're staying. They're now in the privacy, the secrecy of their house that evening, that they can shut the door behind them and then turn to Jesus and say, "Okay, now that we're in the house, tell us what on earth you were talking about." One of the things that I think we modern readers, modern Christians, sometimes skip over in the gospel accounts, especially in gospels like Matthew or Mark, is how prominent this theme of secrecy is. This theme of hiddenness, of confidentiality. In fact, we've been reading now for the past couple of Sundays through Matthew's 13th chapter, and the entire chapter really, it's a lot of parables, but the parables are always introduced as not just teachings, not just analogies, but as secrets. Chapter 13, verse 10 that we started with this maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the disciples asked Jesus, "Why do you speak to us in parables?" And Jesus said, "To you," meaning the disciples, "it has been given to know the secrets, but to them it has not." And then, even after our parable today, Matthew, the gospel writer, says, Jesus told the crowds all these things, always in parables. Without a parable, he told them nothing. This was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet. "I will open my mouth to speak in parables. I will proclaim what has been hidden from the foundation of the world." Hiddenness, secrets, inner circles, the whole nature of a disciple group, 12 disciples who have some secret knowledge that the rest of the crowds don't have. We don't dwell on that too often. It makes us a little uncomfortable, I think, to think that somehow Jesus is giving some secrets, some hidden things to some people and not to others. But secrets are a huge part of Matthew's gospel, of Mark's gospel especially, and in even pieces of the Bible. So it is given to us as a spiritual gift. It is given to us as a way of discipleship, of being caretakers of secrets. But we have to think about it a little deeper. I think this is why we kind of skim past it, because no one dwells on it. Very rarely does anyone actually stand up and preach to you, as I'm doing today, about keeping secrets. But the disciples kept secrets. The people that Jesus healed, some of them kept secrets, some of them didn't. Jesus kept secrets. How are the secrets that Jesus is talking about, that the Bible talks about, different than maybe what we're uncomfortable with? So let's first of all break that down. Hidden information is not all nefarious, right? What Jesus is giving to his disciples is not knowledge that is hidden from view for the sake of manipulating people, for the sake of deceiving people, tricking people, using people. This is the secrets that we're uncomfortable with, and rightly so. And that's not what we're talking about in the Christian life. We're not talking about keeping secrets so that we can hurt other people, or that we can shield ourselves from accountability, or shield ourselves from our own hypocrisy. These are not the secrets that the Bible talks about in a positive light. Often it talks about those in a negative light, as the wicked who deceive. All secrets are not by definition deception. This is the nuance that we have to have when reading the Bible. Let me give some examples. The Psalms talk about secrets a lot. They talk about both types. They talk about the wicked who deceive with their mouths. That's a kind of deceptive, evil, wicked secret keeping. But then they talk about God. The psalmist, which is this model prayer for us, talks about a God who speaks to them almost exclusively in the secrets of my heart, in the secret places. A God who searches my heart and knows every corner of it, even the hidden places. That wherever I go, even if I try and run away to some secret hideout, the psalmist says, even there, God, you would find me. And says, you, God, love truth, even the truth that is buried deep in my heart that others do not know. Those are beautiful images of a God that in the psalmist's eyes is not just a generalized God, but a God who actually carves out for us little places in our lives that are just ours. Think about that's the kind of intimacy that the psalmist hears when the psalmist talks to God about God knowing the psalmist in secret. A secret that is a good secret can mean nothing more or something, or can just mean that place of ourselves that is so intimate, that is so personal, that no one else knows. You're not hiding it because you're deceiving. You're hiding it because it's yours. And the only person that you share that with is your Creator. Your God, who even it says, also in the Psalms, your God who created you in the secrecy of your mother's womb. That this place of your life is that one thing that you have that is just yours and your God's. That is a beautiful way of recovering what a holy secret can be. Jesus also commands secrets in our giving. We usually read this one on Ash Wednesday. If you give to someone, don't let your other hand know what it's doing. And don't pray out in public with long flowing robes, but go into your inner room and pray in secret. Because your Father who sees in secret will reward in secret. That's not a deception. That's not a harmful, manipulative, evil, wicked secret keeping. That is, again, a place where we are able to have our acts of charity, our acts of devotion, and our acts of worship be freed from the validation of others. We human beings really love validation. If you haven't noticed this about us yet, We want other people to validate and to reward us and to say, oh, you are such a good person. We love you. And that creates a feedback loop where now all of a sudden we start getting a taste of that. And then all of our actions and all of our life and all of our decisions becomes, well, is this going to make someone happy? Or how can I please this person? Or how can I make someone proud? Or how can I show that I am who I am? And now you've gotten sort of trapped up and wrapped up into a life where you are living your entire life for the gaze of someone else's sight. This is not the freedom that we disciples should live in. We live based off of the gaze of the all-knowing God. We don't need everyone to know our good works and our prayers and our praises and our intimate pieces of ourselves. We need our God to know it, and our God does. To live our lives not trying to seek the satisfaction of other people and the approval of other people, but just to seek the life hidden with God. Secrets are not always deceptive. Secrets can bring you about great freedom, to live in freedom in the sight of God, rather than in the sight of human beings. Jesus himself, especially in Mark's gospel, keeps his identity secret. Anytime the disciples kind of clue in on who Jesus really is, or what his mission or what his ministry is about, or Jesus heals someone and they realize who he is, especially in Mark's gospel, he swears them to secrecy. Tell no one. Not because Jesus is trying to manipulate people, or hurt people, or be hypocritical, or hide himself from accountability. He says the time is not ready. Sometimes the time is not ready for something to be revealed. Just like the psalmist talks about God knowing us in the secrecy of the womb, secrets can allow for that sort of gestation period of growth. Growth outside of the sight of people peering, evaluating, assessing. You just get to grow in the secrecy of your God's embrace. Give one more example. Jesus' incarnation is surrounded in secrets. Not everyone knows what's going on. It says that even Mary, who really does know what's going on, she treasures them in her heart and ponders them in the secret of her heart. It's a beautiful image about a secret that Mary is keeping. Joseph keeps a secret. It says that Joseph learns about Mary's questionable pregnancy, and he had every right to make that public knowledge. Right? He even says so. There's sort of an inner dialogue that we get of Joseph in the Christmas story. He says, well, I guess I could take her, out into the public courtyard, make it known to everyone. But instead it says Joseph resolved in his mind that he would go to sleep that night, and the next day he would secretly and quietly divorce her. That secret was exactly the space of growth that the Spirit needed. Because that night, it says an angel visited Joseph and said, do not do what you're planning to do. Change your mind. Change your plans. This is a greater plan than you know. And Joseph was able to do so. And you know what? Not only was he able to change his plans and change his mind, but he was able to do so without consulting anyone, because he had kept it a secret. Right? When we have our entire lives known to others, our entire relationships known to others, then all of a sudden, when we change our minds on something, or we change directions in life, or are we into a relationship, now guess what? You now got to explain yourself to everyone. That fear of explaining yourself to someone, of explaining to the public why you have changed your mind on something, why you changed directions, keeps a lot of people from changing at all. Because they're locked in. Joseph gives us yet another example of how these holy secrets, these holy moments of confidences with God allow for growth. The psalmist shows us growth in the secret places of having a moment in our life that's just you and God. Jesus shows us the secrecy of doing good works so that we are only seeking and growing towards the validation of God and God's sight, not others. And Joseph is showing us, and Jesus is showing us in his own ministry, that important moment of keeping something hidden so that we can continue to change and to grow until the time is here. And today's parable also requires us to think about secrets if we're going to unlock its secret. It says that this man went out and sowed some seeds, and then under the secrecy of night, the deceptive secrecy, the wicked secrecy of night, that comes and sows some wicked seeds. And now there are weeds growing amongst the wheat. And the slaves say, well, we need to gather up all these weeds. And the master says, you can't do it. Because inevitably you're going to pull up all these wheat plants too. The identity of these plants is also held in secret. It is very likely that the weed that Jesus is referring to is a weed that we know about, that is still around in that region of the world, that quite literally is indistinguishable from wheat plants. They grow up side by side, and you cannot tell the difference between an immature wheat plant and an immature weed. The only time that you can tell it is at the time of harvest, when both of them put out their seed pods, and then you go, oh, there's the wheat, that's the wheat. So there's a practicality about what's happening here, but do you see the theme shows up yet again? We have to let the hiddenness remain hidden. It is not time. The wheat. It is not time for the wheat to reveal to us its identity. That is held secret until the secret hour of harvest. And when that hour arrives, now we can rejoice in the harvest. Jesus' explanation to the disciples is that we are the wheat. And in this parable, the wheat says nothing. The wheat keeps quiet. The wheat holds in its secret identity. It doesn't shout out, here, over here, we're the wheat, this is a weed right next to me. They can't do it. The secrecy, the hiddenness in the life of God allows that wheat just to grow until the time is right. That information blooms and blossoms. This is the difference. This is the difference. Secrets are all throughout the Bible. Some are bad. Some are the weeds. Some are the wicked. But there's a lot of secrecy that Jesus encourages us and invites us into, that is the wheat. They look very similar. They sound very similar. That's why we don't talk about it in the church, because it takes too much intellectual work to talk about nuance. To distinguish a secret that is holy from a secret that is wicked. But this inner circle of disciples were formed in secret. You are formed in secret. This is good news for us. That there is actually a model of secrecy that isn't all destructive. That is good wheat. That is helpful for the spiritual life and for the communal life. That's good news. Because otherwise, we feel this pressure that every single bit of information and every single bit of ourselves has to be out there. And I think this is becoming an increasingly dangerous myth that our modern world is telling us. This sort of pop psychology, influencers that people like are talking about things like vulnerability and transparency. And, you need to it's all about self-expression so that, everyone knows exactly who you are and what you did and all your history and all your story and all your hurts and all your past and all your hopes and all your dreams. Why? That is not unequivocally a good thing. We Christians need to be able to be the people that are nuanced and say, I don't know, is that wheat or is that weed? And say, what about this hiddenness with God? If everyone knows everything about me, all my secret desires, all my dirty, baggage, what is there left for God in me? Nothing. What if I want to change my mind? What if I want to have the discipleship, the life of discipleship is about repentance and conversion and changing? What if I want to change? What if I want to do something different? And now I got to explain myself to everyone. The world is wanting us to be as transparent as possible. But it doesn't allow us growth. It doesn't allow us that secret place to be with God, to grow with God, to change, to become, to grow up. So this is a beautiful reprieve from us, for us in the modern world. To hear these words and to really dwell on a theology of secrets for the first time in the life of the church. And to recover and to reclaim and say, as disciples, we've been taught how to keep holy secrets for the sake of growth. Let me give 2 applications and then I'll shut up. And I'll keep the rest of my thoughts secret. This really is important for us in the life of a congregation, especially a small congregation like Messiah. One of the great gifts of small congregations like ours is that you really can't be anonymous here. We're going to know who you are. We're going to know quite a bit about you. If you walk in for the first time, we know immediately, that's a new person, right? That's a good thing. It allows us to build authentic community that, you're just a sort of a faceless number in these other mega churches. So this is a great, beautiful gift. At the same time, that's a gift that requires nurture and nuance and carefulness. Some people want some anonymity, especially when they visit a congregation. I know, for example, my father, he loves to go to the Catholic parish that has the biggest mass so that he can sit in the background and no one talks to him and no one ever knows who he is, right? Okay, maybe eventually he'll grow out of that, but some people are not ready to be known and aren't ready for us to jump on them and say, tell us all about your story, tell us who you are, where you come from, all that. Learn to read body language. Be careful. Be nuanced. We want people to feel seen. We want people to feel like they are welcome to share with us what they're ready to share with us. But also, we need to be ready and prepared and respectful when people are telling us in their words and in their body language, I do not want to tell you anything else. That's why on the back of our prayer table, we even have options. Is this prayer request something you want to keep secret, or do you want us to share? When you are sharing with one another, and someone is sharing something they're struggling with, that's always a great, you can just be blunt. You can say, that sounds really, I will pray for you. Would you like, the pastor to hear about this? Or would you like me to have others pray for you? Make sure you are checking with one another. I think you all are doing a wonderful job of this. So this is not me picking on you all. This is me giving you a reminder about something that in the life of the church we almost never talk about, but needs to be talked about. Because we have to, as a community, be connected with one another while still allowing each of us to be individual people with hidden parts of ourselves. That at some point, we might be ready to share. But that time is not for us to force. We have to be like the servants and just wait when that time is ready. Okay. This is more to my younger people in the crowd. Because as a pastor now, I know. As a pastor now, though, I have to think, am I preparing the people who are my age and younger, how to be Christians when the robots are our overlords, right? Self-expression is a beautiful gift, and you should be proud of who you are. And social media is a great way to keep it connected with people, to keep up with people, and to share who you are. At the same time, everything that goes online stays online. Yes, very good, Jayden. It stays. And at 18 years old, 17 years old, 14 years old, you might think, I know who I am. You're going to change a million times. This relationship I have, we're getting married, we're going to last forever. And then all of a sudden, I have to feel like, well, now I have to suffer through going through my Instagram feed, seeing all these influencers where they're all crying and talking about why they broke up. I don't care, right? But now they have to do that. Y'all don't want to have a breakup be public, okay? All right, that's my word of advice. That's ridiculous. Be careful. There's not going to be any rules. But it is okay for you to keep pieces of your life that are just yours and just for God. We are like wheat that gets to grow in secret until we are ready to bloom. We are like the disciples that are allowed to retreat at the end of the day, go into the house, lock the door, and turn to our God and say, what does this all mean? Secrets are a beautiful space for growth. Amen.